For decades, Ringo Starr was seen as the smiling Beatle, the easygoing drummer who brought warmth and humor to the world's most famous band. While John and Paul were often portrayed as the creative geniuses and George as the quiet spiritual force, Ringo seemed content being the friendly presence in the background. He played emotionally, instinctively, never trying to dominate the spotlight. Fans loved him for that. But as the years passed and Ringo entered his later life, a more complex story began to surface. Behind the jokes and peace and love message was a man who had endured deep personal struggles, health scares, and long battles with addiction. His life wasn't just a fairy tale of fame and success. It was shaped by illness, insecurity, loss, and resilience. At an age when most legends quietly fade from view, Ringo surprised people by speaking honestly about his past, not to shock anyone, but to show that survival sometimes matters more than perfection. A childhood marked by illness and survival, Ringo Starr was born Richard Starkey on July 7, 1940, in Liverpool's Dingle district, a working-class area shaped by hardship and community spirit. His early years were defined less by music and more by survival. His father left when Ringo was very young, leaving his mother Elsie to raise him alone while working multiple jobs. As if financial strain wasn't enough, Ringo's health repeatedly failed him. At 6 years old, a routine appendicitis surgery led to severe complications, keeping him hospitalized for nearly a year. Just when he began to regain normalcy, tuberculosis struck during his early teens, confining him to a sanatorium for 2 more years. These long hospital stays isolated him from school and friendships, but they also introduced him to music. Hospital staff used simple percussion instruments to entertain children, and Ringo instinctively connected with rhythm. Without realizing it, those quiet moments of tapping and timing laid the foundation for a future that would change music history forever. Finding music the hard way. By the time Ringo recovered, formal education felt impossible to reclaim. He left school without qualifications and entered the workforce, taking whatever jobs were available. Music, however, never left him. In the late 1950s, skiffle music swept Britain, and Ringo joined local groups using makeshift instruments, learning rhythm through feel rather than training. His natural timing stood out. When he joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, one of Liverpool's most popular bands, he finally found confidence and identity. It was during this period that he adopted the name Ringo Starr, inspired by the rings he wore and his love for country music. The Hurricanes played relentlessly, including long residencies in Hamburg, Germany, where Ringo crossed paths with a young band called the Beatles. At the time, his group was more established, but something about the Beatles' energy stuck with him. Fate quietly began lining up the moment that would define his life, becoming a Beatle. In August 1962, everything changed. The Beatles, searching for a drummer who fit both musically and personally, turned to Ringo. Accepting the offer meant leaving a successful band and stepping into uncertainty, but Ringo took the leap. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Fans loyal to the previous drummer protested loudly, sometimes aggressively, chanting against him during early shows. It was a brutal introduction to global fame, yet within the band, Ringo felt at home. His steady, expressive drumming gave the Beatles a new cohesion. Over time, audiences noticed what the others already knew. Ringo didn't overpower songs, he served them. His playing added swing, space, and personality. As the Beatles evolved creatively, so did his role. From subtle grooves to iconic rhythms, Ringo became the heartbeat of the band, proving that musical greatness isn't always about complexity, but about feel. Holding his own in a changing band. As the Beatles grew more experimental, internal tensions increased. Each member evolved in different directions, and the sense of unity that once defined them slowly eroded. Ringo often felt overlooked, especially as songwriting credit and creative control became sources of conflict. There were moments when he questioned his place in the band, even briefly stepping away during particularly difficult sessions. Yet his importance became clear whenever he was absent. His return was always met with relief and quiet appreciation. Ringo contributed some of the band's most beloved moments, not just as a drummer, but as a vocalist whose warmth connected instantly with listeners. Songs like Yellow Submarine and With a Little Help from My Friends weren't about technical brilliance. They were about sincerity. As the Beatles approached their end, Ringo remained the emotional glue, trying to keep peace even when the fractures were too deep to repair. Life after the Beatles. When the Beatles officially ended in 1970, Ringo faced a new challenge, proving he could stand alone. Rather than chasing trends, he followed his instincts, releasing music that reflected his personal taste. His early solo work explored classic standards and country influences, surprising critics but connecting with audiences. As the decade progressed, he found major success with heartfelt songs like It Don't Come Easy and Photograph, both of which showcased emotional depth rather than bravado. His 1973 album Ringo became one of the most successful solo projects by any former Beatle, helped by collaborations with his old bandmates. At the same time, he branched into acting, embracing roles that matched his natural charm. On the surface, everything looked bright, but away from the spotlight, Ringo struggled with excess, drifting into unhealthy habits that slowly began to overshadow his success. Losing control and facing reality. Fame, freedom, and unresolved insecurity eventually took a toll. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Ringo's life became increasingly unbalanced. Substance use became a way to cope with pressure and emptiness, affecting both his work and personal relationships. His first marriage ended, and while he continued to perform and appear successful, he later admitted he was often emotionally absent. Meeting actress Barbara Bach brought new love into his life, but it didn't immediately bring stability. Eventually, the consequences became impossible to ignore. A moment of crisis forced Ringo to confront who he had become and what he stood to lose. Rather than deflecting blame, he chose responsibility. In 1988, he entered rehabilitation, committing himself fully to sobriety. It was not an easy transformation, but it was a necessary one. For the first time, he faced his past honestly and chose survival over denial. Redemption through music and sobriety. Recovery didn't end Ringo's career. It reshaped it. In 1989, he formed the All-Star Band, a rotating group of legendary musicians who shared the stage as equals. The concept was simple, but powerful. Celebrate music without ego. The shows became joyful, communal experiences, blending Beatles classics with hits from every performer involved. Audiences responded instantly. For Ringo, the band offered structure, purpose, and connection, all vital for maintaining sobriety. Touring the world with fellow musicians who respected him reinforced something he had long struggled to believe. He mattered. The All-Star Band became one of the most successful legacy touring acts in music history. More importantly, it allowed Ringo to perform without pressure, focusing on joy rather than expectation. His message of peace and love, once dismissed as simplistic, now felt earned. The legacy of a survivor. Ringo Starr's legacy isn't just about drumming, fame, or being a Beatle. It's about endurance. He survived childhood illness, insecurity, global pressure, addiction, and reinvention. His drumming influenced generations, not through flash, but through feel. Artists from Phil Collins to Dave Grohl have praised his instinctive style, recognizing how deeply it shaped modern rock. In later years, Ringo has spoken openly about his past, not to rewrite history, but to own it. His honesty offers something rare in celebrity culture: accountability without self-pity. Now in his 80s, still touring and smiling, he stands as proof that it's never too late to change course. The funny Beatle turned out to be the quiet survivor. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. And sometimes that's the most meaningful legacy of all.